All right, folks, it's that time again where we get on the motorcycle and we cover 5 stupid things that atheists believe in. You know, this is one of the most epic motorcycles we've ever done these videos on. This is a Kawasaki Z1000. You know, it's called the 1000, but it's actually over 1,040 cc's. I believe it's 1,043 cc motor. Now, we're going to make America great again, and one of the ways we're going to do that is by exposing the madness of atheism. And we're going to do it on this motorcycle in a first-person ride. Now, here's the 5 stupid things we're going to be talking about today. These are 5 stupid things that atheists say and believe in. You know, I used to be an atheist, and you know, the mentality of atheism is they probably believe that this motorcycle just popped into existence uncaused out of nothing. And you know, this motorcycle is a product of intelligent design. But my body, your body, is much more complex than this motorcycle. So if the motorcycle was not created just by a random explosion caused by nothing, how much more ridiculous it is to think that our body, with the complex respiratory system and our complex, you know, eyes and brain and our arteries and our heart and our lungs and our reproductive organs and all that, our legs, our bones, our inner skeleton, excuse me, it would be ridiculous to think that all those things just came into existence by luck and chance. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is going to be a fun video. Let us make America great again by literally destroying atheism. So here's the 5 things we're going to talk about. 5 stupid things that atheists say and believe in. We're going to talk about the founders, how they say the founders were against religion. We're going to talk about that, which is wrong. They're totally wrong. We're going to talk about evolution. You know how they say mutations help evolution move along? Well, DNA has now destroyed that theory. We're going to talk about that. And don't forget to click below this video in the description to see a radio show we did on evolution and how evolution is basically dead. We're going to talk about the atheist burden of proof, and also we're going to talk about how atheists say, well, why was the Bible, namely the New Testament, why was it written, you know, years and years after Jesus Christ's death and resurrection? We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about that objection they have and how stupid it is. So let's get on the motorcycle. And of course, luck did it. We're going to talk about how atheists always use the, you know, the argument that luck did it. Luck created the universe, luck created us. And oh, and by the way, before we get going, listen to this exhaust. This is a Procovik exhaust, and it's one of the most epic exhausts I've ever heard. Listen to this. Isn't that awesome? So let's do this. We're going to be taking you on a very beautiful scenic route. Let's begin with stupid thing atheists say, number 1. So one of the stupid things that atheists say is that our founders of America here in the United States, look at these guys. They're not allowed to be doing that, but it is the last great freedom in America. They're like riding an ATV down the street. But one of the dumbest things that atheists say is that the founders were escaping religion and they didn't want anything to do with religion, which is a big lie. It was the complete opposite. The founders were escaping government when the Pilgrims, when they left and they went out to discover America, they were fleeing government. They wanted to be able to worship God in their own way. So we're getting into some curvy roads here. So let's talk about stupid thing number one. The atheists will lie and say that the founders were fleeing a religion. Do you know that all the signers of the Declaration of Independence, 100% of them, admitted that God exists? 100%. There wasn't an atheist in the bunch. So you have 56 of them. Only 2 were deists, and deists are not atheists. They're the complete opposite of atheists. Deism is a type of theism, and it was Franklin and Jefferson. And all of them claimed to believe in God. And there was a rallying cry that the founders used when they were fighting the tyrannical hand of England, and they would say, "No king but King Jesus." All of them signed the document, the sacred document, in the year of our Lord, referring to Jesus Christ. So it's interesting that our founders believe there's things that come from God that are self-evident. And ladies and gentlemen, this is why we're doing this video, because it is self-evident, like the founders believed, it is self-evident that God exists. But to some atheists, it's not self-evident that atheism is full of crapola. Look at these animals here. Feeding time at the zoo. So, we're going to give you 5 stupid things that atheists believe in. So, number 1, we shot that down. All the founders believed that America was to be founded on freedom of religion, not freedom from religion. And I heard that the evil atheist group Freedom From Religion, I just emailed them the other day, they lost another lawsuit where they're trying to get crosses off of tombstones and out of cemeteries. And atheists are not tolerant. What they want to do is destroy our Christian values. This is why atheism is so rooted in communism. Christianity is American. Communism is atheism, and atheism is communism. So let's go to stupid thing number 2 that atheists always say. And hold on. What the heck? There's a donkey right here. 2 donkeys. They must have known I was speaking of asses in this video. Speaking of asses, you know, sometimes I'll be debating an atheist, and you've got to hear my debates below with Sweet Cuddly Atheists. Right below this video, I'm going to put a link there of all my debates with atheists. And they'll say, "Do you believe in a talking snake?" And I'll say, "Well, you just proved that asses can speak because you're an atheist." I love the atheists. I'm doing all this in jest. Okay, number 2. Number 2 on the list is literally full of number 2. So atheists are obsessed with the theory of evolution. Now, I did a complete radio show on how evolution is dead in 2020. Hey, brother. How you doing, man? And I'm going to put some links below here, a radio show that I did, and also how DNA has destroyed evolution. But for those of you that are new Christians, and you're, excuse me, you're new to YouTube, let me tell you something. The atheists do have a God, and it is evolution. So atheists will say, because there's evolution, this is their argument, therefore God doesn't exist. But when you press them and say, even if evolution were true, which
50% of it is true, but it's really only the creation part, microevolution, and 50% is not true. It hasn't even been proven yet. But even if you press the atheist and say, how does evolution prove that God doesn't exist? They will not be able to do it. They'll say, Shock. They'll talk to you like you're stupid. They'll say, Shock, listen. Don't you realize at one point the fish looked like this? And then over thousands of years, the fish changed, and now the fish looks like this. You see how its bone structure changed? And I'm like, yeah. 2 words for you, Mr. Atheist. So what? What is it still? Well, it's a fish, Shock. I go, it's a fish. More donkeys up here. There is no missing link. We should be swimming, doing backstrokes, literally drowning in transitional fossils. There is no missing link. They have not found the missing link. So the only thing that has been proven is creation. Go to creation.com and educate yourself on why evolution is literally dead because of DNA. And also, when atheists say evolution, they'll say that it proves that God doesn't exist. I'll ask them, I'll say, why would it, even if all of it was true, why would it prove that God doesn't exist? And here's their answer to me. And they'll answer you this way too. They'll, for example, see that car in front of me? It's like this. They'll say, well, at one point, the car looked like this. Or at one point, the fish looked like this. And then over thousands of years, it changed, and now the fish looks like this. And I go, yeah, but dude, it's still a fish. It hasn't transitioned into something else. You have to show some transitional links. And even evolutionists admit that the lack of transitional fossils in the fossil record shows that macroevolution is not true, where one species can transition into another species. A cat can I'm using an analogy, over millions of years transition into being a dog, or the Pakicetus can transition into being a whale, and we just don't have the missing link. But the atheists will just not let it go, and that's okay. Let them hang themselves with evolution, because the only thing we see in science, the only thing that is scientifically proven, remember, science, you have to be able to demonstrate that what happens here in California happens in Texas, and it happens in Arkansas, and you have to be able to duplicate the experiment. We don't see in science these missing links or these transitional fossils, and this road is messed up. All we see is slight change within limits. How the atheist correctly said, well, look, the fish is changing its bone structure. Yeah, but it's still a fish, dude. Give it up. So, you see how we have this vehicle in front of us? It would be like at 1 year there was no spoiler, no fin on the back of that vehicle, and the atheist is talking about how over time, it's a Dodge in front of us, over time this vehicle right here on the left, this Dodge, changed over time, and no one's arguing against the idea that things change within limits over time. But the obsession that atheists have about evolution, it doesn't show where things came from in the first place. Like this Ford Fiesta in front of us. If you and I, let's say you're on the back of my motorcycle, and you and I were riding along with an atheist, and he goes, well, evolution's true because the Ford Fiesta has changed over time. See, at one time, it looked like this, and you could replace Ford Fiesta with species. It looked like this, and then it changed over time like this and like this. Well, you're not explaining, first of all, how the Ford got there in the first place, which the answer is just like this motorcycle, a product of intelligent design. And secondly, it's still a Ford. In other words, the fish is still a fish. So don't let these atheist dodo birds trick you into thinking that evolution is anything but slight change over time. It's just change over time. Big whoopie-doo. So when an atheist starts talking about evolution, even though macroevolution hasn't been proven, I still will just say, so what? How does that prove God doesn't exist? Does it? No. You know who finally admitted that it doesn't, even if macroevolution were true, which it's not? Richard Dawkins. Richard Dawkins said evolution does not prove that God does not exist. So have we heard any arguments through this video that show that God does not exist? Of course not. They lied about the founders. They lied about evolution. Evolution doesn't prove God exists. Again, go to creation.com to see the countless frauds that atheists have done, even planting bones from other species in the dig sites, the grave sites, so to speak, of other species to make it look like it was a different species. So now let's go to the burden of proof. As we all know, atheists are wimps. They don't want to give arguments against the existence of God, and they'll spend all their time on YouTube saying God doesn't exist. But when I challenge them to debate, and I ask them, okay, provide me some proof and evidence that would show that atheism is accurate and correct, they don't have any arguments against God's existence. So they'll say the burden of proof is not on them, it's on the one making the claim. And then it's so fun to kind of toy with them. I'll say, would you say that you're claiming God exists? And they won't say, no, I'm not claiming God doesn't exist. It's so fun to do this with them. And I'll say, are you claiming that God doesn't exist? Well, no, I'm not claiming God doesn't exist. They're such wimps. So they'll only say that they don't believe in God. Well, who cares what they say they feel like? That's dishonest too, because we know in the first 2 pages of Romans, it says, indeed, the atheist does know that God exists. It talks about how people are suppressing the truth in unrighteousness. They have some sin in their life, so they suppress it, the truth of God in unrighteousness. So when the atheist says, I don't have a burden of proof, well, you do as an atheist because you're claiming God doesn't exist. If you're an agnostic and you're claiming you don't know if God exists or not, then I would admit that you don't have a burden of proof, because obviously you're making no claim. But have you guys noticed that atheists have moved away from the definition that atheism is, the claim God doesn't exist, to more of a mental state? And the mental state of someone saying that they do not believe that God exists is irrelevant to the facts of God existing or the claim that God doesn't exist. The mental state is irrelevant. So I find that absolutely hilarious how they say they don't have the burden of proof. Now, have you guys seen that video where this young kid calls up the Atheist Experience show and gets them, it exposes them for Matt Dillahunty being a liar on live TV? You'll see it right below here. The kid calls up and challenges Matt Dillahunty because what Matt Dillahunty is saying is actually dishonest, and he's lying on the TV show. So the kid calls up and he basically calls Matt on the carpet and has to keep him honest, and Matt then backtracks and contradicts himself in something that he said earlier, and the kid even says it. He goes, you know what? The show's dishonest. Do you know I have been challenging the Atheist Experience Show for years to answer one simple question? They haven't done it yet. And people are trying to call the show, but they keep getting hung up on. I get the email saying, Shock, I call them, but they hang up on me. And they've been asking them, what proof and evidence do you have that would finally at last prove that atheism is accurate and correct? But they won't be put on the air. And so, if you can call the Atheist Experience Show and challenge them to answer that question, what proof and evidence can you provide that would finally at last prove that atheism is accurate and correct? It would be awesome. But, according to that kid that called in, and you'll see the kid on video right below this video, he too agrees with me that the show is dishonest. That kid knows more about the Bible than Matt Dillahunty and the entire Atheist Experience Show cast combined. So let's see, that was number... Let's see. Oh, that was number 3. So let's talk about... All right, we got some twisties here. Let's talk about the objection that atheists bring up. They'll say the New Testament is untrue because it was written after the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ. And to be fair, the atheists will say the death and so-called resurrection of Jesus Christ. But I'm going to say it the correct way. They'll say the New Testament was written after the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ. And they'll say, well, why wasn't it written like a year after? What had taken them so long to write it years and 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 years? Sometimes they'll even inaccurately say hundreds of years later, which is not true. But I'm going to explain to you, and it's very simple and it's logical, why the New Testament was written, part of it was written after Jesus' death and resurrection, and why it was years after the death and resurrection, okay? In those days, they didn't have Pinterest, they didn't have YouTube, they didn't have Twitter, they didn't have cell phone. They used what's called oral tradition. And the children in school, in the schools, would be taught to memorize Scripture, to memorize the Old Testament and the New Testament. Now, I find it interesting that the New Testament and Mark, Luke, John, I find it interesting that these Gospels were written as the living disciples and the living witnesses, not all of them, but some of them started to pass away. So imagine this, it makes sense. You're walking with Jesus Christ. You and I are his disciples and his followers. How you doing, brother? And what was Jesus' commandment to the disciples? Remember, he said, go out into all the world and preach the gospel. That's what he said. I got to go kind of slow here because these tracks are murder on the bike. He didn't say write things down. He said, I want you to go out and preach the gospel. Do you know, you can look up in the scripture, there were 72 people that Jesus commissioned to go out and preach the gospel. He didn't say stay in your home and write and print up these documents on papyrus. He didn't say that. He said go out and preach the gospel, and it worked. Christianity is the largest, most powerful force for good in the world, and if you want to say it's the largest religion, go ahead. But it's the largest force for good in the world. Now, as the disciples and the witnesses started to pass away, someone had a good idea. Hey, you know what? Let's write this down. Let's write down these teachings of Jesus, so we can have them for eternity. We could have them for all time. Now, I've heard the argument from atheists. They'll say, well, it's like the game of telephone. One person says one thing, and let's say you have all the disciples, right? One person tells one thing, and then it goes out into the world, and one person... Well, you can't use the objection, my atheist friends, that it's like the game of telephone, because the disciples and the witnesses were still living. So let's say you're a follower of Christ, and you're telling the story that you witnessed Jesus Christ resurrected, and the disciples are saying the same thing, and I'm on the end of the stupid game of telephone, so to speak. Let's just use the atheist lame argument. All I have to do, if I want to verify that it's true, is go back to you, because you're still living, and say, hey, did you really say that? And you would say, yeah, I saw the risen Lord Jesus Christ. So the game of telephone thing is so stupid, because all you would have to do, hold on, let me take this corner, is go back to the person that originally claimed to see Jesus Christ alive, and there was over 500 brethren, not to mention children and women also. Just the brethren, 500. And even Paul says many of them are alive today. Like, in other words, go back. Okay, you want to say it's the game of telephone? Go back and talk to the persons that claimed it. So this whole thing about when they say, well, the Bible was written hundreds of years, which isn't true, but the Bible was written 30, 40 years, 70 years after the resurrection of Jesus Christ. That's not true either, because they're saying a blanket, the Bible. You could say parts of the New Testament were written after Jesus Christ died and resurrected. However, so what? How does that prove that it's not true? Give me an argument. Well, if it was so earth-shattering, why didn't they write it down? Look, if I'm walking with Jesus Christ and I witness him crucified and I see him rise again, why the hell would I not tell people verbally, especially in that time? Why wouldn't I go out and tell the world, which is exactly what happened? Why would I do what takes longer and go in my house and they didn't just have this papyrus, if I'm pronouncing it correctly, to write on. It was very expensive. Even Paul talks about this, how he has to, it wasn't like where you just go to Staples or Office Depot or Walmart to get it. He actually writes in one of his letters, and he asked for this writing material to be sent to him. So when an atheist says, yeah, but it took all this time, for them to write after the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ. Yeah, it makes sense. The eyewitnesses were still alive right after the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ. Over 500 brethren witnessed Jesus Christ die a horrible death and then rise again. So it makes sense that as the witnesses start passing away, that then 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 years, that's probably the life expectancy around there, was like 40, 50, 60, 70. Cool, look at this train we got coming through. I love this route right here. But it makes sense that they would then say, you know what, for all posterity, let's go ahead and start writing this down. So let's see what's here on number 5 here. Hold on, I have to take this corner before I look. Oh yeah, number 5 is atheists always say luck did it. You know, when you go right below here, you'll see some debates. There's one debate that is one of my favorite, and it's a pastor that defeats the Atheist Experience show in debate. You'll see that right below this video that you're watching here. Atheists don't like it. Right below here, you can go to that link. I'm going to say the link if you just want to go to it. It's called debatesonvideo.blogspot.com. blogspot.com. debatesonvideo.blogspot.com. Hold on. Okay, this bike is just so awesome, you guys. It's amazing the power that it has. So they'll say luck did it, and in many of my debates, I'm going to put some of my debates, right below this video. I'll put that video of the kid calling in, destroying the Atheist Experience show also. But in many of my debates, I'll talk about how whatever begins to exist has a cause. The universe began to exist, therefore it has a cause. And they'll say, well, luck caused the universe to come into existence. But the problem is when I say, explain what luck is, luck to them is some magic power or something that has power. But then I have to explain to them luck is powerless. So whenever an atheist says luck did it or randomness did it, when I say, well, what are you saying, that luck caused the universe to come into existence? Watch closely here what they'll say. They'll say, no, I'm not saying that. They'll say, I'm saying after the Big Bang, after the expansion of the universe, luck caused all these series of events to happen. In other words, life. In other words, the earth to be habitable. In other words, all these species. They'll say luck caused all that to happen. But when I say, well, how did it cause it to happen? See, they can never explain how luck did it. And luck doing it is the lamest thing that an atheist can ever say. Luck has no power. Come with me, folks, to the basketball court. We blindfold our atheist friend and we give him 20 basketballs and we say, start trying to throw it into the hoop. And out of 20, he makes 4 baskets. Now, he takes off his blindfold and he says, you see, that proves that luck can make those baskets in. And then I say, hey, Mr. Atheist, did luck pick up the basketball? And he says, no. Did luck throw the basketball? And he says, no. So luck didn't do jack diddly. Luck can't do anything. Luck is just a mathematical equation. We give the guy 20 basketballs and he makes 4 in, so he got lucky on 4. In other words, but he didn't go ahead and just sit there and it did it by luck. You needed a prime mover. You guys ever hear Ben Shapiro? We're getting on the freeway here and we're going to end the video. Ben Shapiro said he can never be an atheist because it's irrational, and he talks about how you must have a prime mover. Luck cannot create anything. Luck is just a label we put on how the atheist made in 4 out of 20 baskets. He said you must have a prime mover. Something that always existed that did not have to exist. I'm sorry, that did not have to, it had to exist actually. Something that always existed that did not have to be created. When you think about it, we know that the universe began to exist, therefore something created the universe. Whatever begins to exist has a cause. Now we know God always existed, that's what Scripture says. So it makes sense, ladies and gentlemen, it makes sense that we have the green arrow. It makes sense that we must have something that always existed that cannot not exist. Otherwise, everything would collapse. You can't have an infinite regress of causes. So it's not luck that created the universe. It is God that created the universe. Luck is powerless. And that's one thing I don't understand is atheists will say luck and randomness did it. So if they ever say that, say, explain to me how luck has power, how randomness has power. There's something behind the luck and randomness that they're positing. In other words, luck is powerless to do anything. Anything that begins to exist, as we mentioned, has a cause. The universe began to exist, therefore it has a cause. And when atheists say luck did it, that's stupid. Let me give you some bonus stupid things that atheists say. Atheists say there's no Santa Claus, therefore God doesn't exist. They'll say there's no fairies, therefore God doesn't exist. Now, anyone that says there's no fairies has never been to California, because they do have fairies in California. I'm talking about Disneyland. I don't know what you guys are thinking about. Here's some other bonus stupid things. Why do atheists always bash God, but they never bash Satan? You ever notice that? Who's your daddy? So, ladies and gentlemen, help me make America great again. In the words of Jerry Maguire, help me. Help me help you. Help me help you make America great again by showing America how full of crap atheism is. And do you guys know it's now, we're going on August, we're in August, and the atheist experience show still has not answered my challenge. You want to see my challenge to them? Look right below this video for the Shock of God challenge. Here's the challenge. I want the atheist experience show, without evading like they did last time, to answer this question. What proof and evidence can you provide that would finally at last prove that atheism is accurate and correct? Last time they evaded and hung up. Do you want to see them evading and hanging up? Look right below this video and you'll see them evading the question and hanging up. So God bless you guys. Thank you for clicking share below this video. And would you please call the Atheist Experience Show and ask them to answer the Shock of God challenge? Here's the challenge. What proof and evidence can you provide that would finally at last prove that atheism is accurate and correct?